Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Muslim Marriage Podcast, where we talk about healthy relationships from a Muslim lens. I'm Zara Hassan,
And I'm AJ, and we've been married for 2.5 years.
and let's get started.
Let's get started.
On today's episode, we're going to be talking about loyalty and trust. I'm thinking that we talk about it in terms of two dimensions, right? So the first dimension, we'll talk about infidelity, social media use, and just generally how we'll use phones, right? So each other's use of phones as an example of how to talk about trust. And the second dimension is we'll talk about it in terms of how to approach these topics during the talking stage versus when you're married.
Honestly, I thought today's episode was going to be like how to be kind to each other, you know?
Yeah.
But apparently you changed it to loyalty and trust, and now I've lost trust in you.
Well, I'll do what I can to restore that. Yeah?
Okay, yeah,
We'll see.
it is about loyalty and trust after all.
We'll see what we can do. But does that make sense? Like those two dimensions?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Because whenever this topic is brought up, I feel like a lot of the perspective that the people really try to dissect is not very helpful. Like they try to ask questions about why people. Well, so let's start with infidelity, right? So the common question is people will ask is, well, why do men cheat and why do women cheat? Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if answering that question will be very useful because there will be as many reasons for cheating as there are people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And each individual person who cheats will probably have a number of reasons why that person cheated. So like to dissect all of them and to come up, even if you were able to come up with a full transcript and a reason, like a notarized letter explaining all of the different reasons, it won't really be helpful, right? So instead, we're going to talk about it in more practical terms, in terms of how to talk about this subject during the talking stage. Let's start with the talking stage.
Okay. I do want to set the record straight, though.
Yeah.
Your plan never was to do how to be kind to each other.
No.
No, I said that just for the joke.
I know. Okay. All right. I was like, where did you? Okay.
You see?
I did. Yeah.
Now I have your trust.
The whole time.
All right, guys. Episode's over.
Okay.
We've got there.
Okay.
We got to loyalty and trust.
So within the talking stage, right? When we start with infidelity, the first question that people should start to ask is, what is cheating to you? Like what would you consider cheating?
It depends. For some men, right? It's opportunity. Right?
No, but like just in terms of like for example, you're with me.
Sure.
Right? And God forbid I did something that you consider cheating.
Let's do a different example, like a different couple, right? Person A is married to person B.
Okay. All right. So person A we'll say is a man and person B is a woman. What can person B do that person A, the man, will consider cheating? Like what's the lowest threshold?
I would say talking to somebody with romantic interest.
Can you give an example?
Flirting with someone.
Like what would be flirting? Like is it you'll know it when you see it thing? Or
yeah,
can you give
what you think of as flirting when I say the word, that's what flirting is, right? Like I don't want to have to define it. It's like talking to somebody in a way where you're trying to convey that you want to go somewhere romantically with them.
Oh, okay. So how about you look really pretty today? Would that count as flirting?
No, I don't think that counts as flirting. It's super inappropriate.
It is
for a man to say to a woman, especially in the Muslim context.
Yeah. I think this sweater looks pretty on you.
Even that would be weird to say.
But would you think that would meet the threshold of cheating?
No, that wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
Because the other person is not aware
Yeah.
that the person is trying to take it to a different level.
Also, it has to be something that the both people.
It has to be something where the person, the recipient,
Yeah.
understands, okay, this person is trying to take me somewhere.
Okay. All right. So it's something that is bilateral, that both individuals are aware of what's happening.
That's like the beginning of the cheating phase.
Yeah.
But if we're talking strictly the definition, cheating is when they engage each other in the physical sense.
Okay. So if we let me talk about it for me personally. What would constitute as cheating, and then we'll see if you agree. For me, there is physical cheating, and then there's emotional cheating.
Yeah.
I think that my threshold is fairly low for what counts. So what I described, if a man says, "I think you look really pretty today," that would make me feel some type of way.
Yeah.
That would make me feel some type of way.
Yeah.
That, especially if I see that multiple days in a row, right? So if you see one day, like, I can see through a phone or message, I think you look really pretty today. And then the next day, they start asking personal questions about, well, how did that thing go at your house? Like, how are you? And they're keeping up with them in an emotional context.
Yeah.
And then all of this will add up to what's going on here.
Yeah.
To me, that would be a conversation. It would start to reach the threshold of cheating when the man will now start to say things about me, right? Our relationship, right? Well, they'll start to say things like, well, this is what's happening here, and what they're emotionally confide, so that there is an emotional intimacy there that's different from what they experience with their other coworkers or their other friends, right? When they start to create space for this person in their heart and in their day.
Yeah.
To me, that's cheating. That's where my threshold is. By the time you get and on the other extreme where you have a situation that's obviously purely physical, right? Because sometimes that does happen, where there really isn't any emotional context. It's just they met somebody and some level of physical interaction happened that would, at the very least, constitute now you now have to do wudu or something, right? It's, to me, that's already, it's cheating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we agree on both aspects of cheating. The emotional cheating is what I was going towards at the beginning as the early threshold of cheating. For me, it was a lot more simple than your definition. Your definition is in depth, right?
Yeah, I've thought about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about it because it doesn't cross my mind,
Yeah.
But you're a coach, a relationship coach, so it's your expertise that you have to discuss this with day to day,
this is a problem that does happen in the Muslim community, right? Like, for context, alhamdulillah, I've never been cheated on, and I don't think you've ever been cheated. Yeah. So, but over the years, I've had many clients, both Muslim and non-Muslim, right? And I would say that this problem is prevalent regardless of a person's religion. And the reason why I said what I said at the beginning, where the reason why this partner cheated doesn't actually matter, right? The consequences of that is going to look the same, right? The devastation, the grieving process, the trauma of it is going to look the same to the person who was cheated on. And the recovery it will not really be informed by specifically why I was cheated. So it's not really useful information that will affect how their life will continue. But yeah, it's something that happens on both ways. So within the talking stage, when you're still in the talking stage, the conversation you and I just had is a very important conversation where you try to outline as clearly as you can, what do you think constitutes as cheating, right? So that each of you have an understanding, first of all, that you have an understanding of where it is that each of your boundaries lie, And second of all, it's a very good opportunity to practice conversations where boundaries are outlined.
Yeah.
Right? So this is an easy place to practice that skill because you're going to need that later on in other aspects, right? So that's the first thing that you talk about.
Yeah.
So the second thing is it's important to understand that you're not going to be able to talk yourself into a relationship that is cheating proof, right? So let me explain what I mean by that. Sometimes when people have been cheated on in the past, right, or they have this anxiety about, I really don't want to be cheated on, they try to speak to the potential or the person that they're in a talking stage with by saying, listen, I'm not going to accept this. I'm not going to accept this. I'm not going to accept this. Or to say, I need you to promise. I know it sounds silly, but people do this.
Yeah.
They say things like, I need you to promise me that if you think about cheating or you're going to cheat, to let me know about it. Or they go into detail about how they've been cheated on in the past.
Mm-hmm.
In some way, they're trying to make this new partner extra averse, right? Extra averse to cheating on them.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work. That never works. So it's important to understand that you're never going to be able to manufacture a situation where a person will not cheat on you because of the things you say to them.
Yeah.
Right.
You're saying you can't manufacture loyalty.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Unless you open up a tea shop and you call that brand loyal.
All right. I don't know if it's going to have the same effect on your relationship.
Just take a sip of some loyalty.
The loyalty. All right. It depends on the ingredients, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, you won't be able to talk yourself into a loyal relationship or talk your partner into being loyal, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that if we talk a little bit about the psychology of cheating, then it gives you a better idea of perspective. There was
this one time I was playing that video game.
Yeah.
You remember, right? With the medieval house building, land, farms, and everything.
Yeah.
And some part through the game, my character got married.
Yes, I remember.
To one of the villagers.
Yeah.
And sometime later had a child.
Mm-hmm.
And you walked in, and I was showing you around the different houses that I had built and the farms that I had tilled in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I showed you my house.
Yes.
And you're like, who are these people in the house?
Yes, explain.
And I'm like, oh, this is my wife and this is my child. And that hurt you.
It's still, I'm honestly a little salty right now.
Yeah, it hurt you. And I was like, these are pixels. Right? These are pixels. Mm-hmm. They're not real. Mm-hmm. But you say it doesn't matter. It's the connotation that's involved in that.
Yeah.
That matters. And so what I did after a little bit is I started a new game.
Yeah, you broke up with her.
I started a new game entirely. I ended that entire world.
Yeah.
Started a new game.
Yeah.
And that character is single.
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Because she had a different name, and I know this sounds silly. I know it sounds silly, and I hear myself being silly, but how I feel about it is it's bringing up all the emotions once again. I'm still a little bit salty.
Yeah.
But if we we'll come back to talking about that within.
It taught me how the abstract can be real.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? It's not, you can't really define for your partner what counts as cheating for them. All you can do is ask questions to find out where their boundaries are, right? Yeah. And it's really difficult for you to decide whether or not those boundaries are valid. They're valid to them, and that's all that matters. Mm-hmm. And all you have to do is decide if you're going to respect them or not respect them. And if you are not respecting a person's boundaries, you're not respecting them.
Yeah.
So if this is thing that is going to be an issue for you when you have this conversation, when you're like, you know what, I don't really think that counts as cheating. To me, it doesn't count as cheating, and therefore I'm going to do that. That's fine, right? But understand that if you move in that way, and you are not respecting this person's boundaries and therefore not respecting them, you shouldn't really be with them.
It's to put it into perspective.
Yes.
It's pretty much the phrase,
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I offended you.
Oh, yeah.
You're not saying sorry. That's not an apology.
No.
I'm sorry if I offended you. Well, obviously you can see the person's offended.
Yeah.
So there's no ifs there.
Yeah.
You just gotta suck it up and say, I'm sorry for offending you.
Yeah, for doing the thing that offended you.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's more encompassing. So I like that example that you brought up with the video game, right?
Mm.
So for me, I know it'll be silly for some people, but for me that counts as cheating.
Mm.
And I really like that when you had that conversation, you didn't invalidate me.
Mm.
You didn't say, hey, you did say this is pixels.
Yeah.
But you saw that it was important to me, and then you said, okay, I'm going to respect that that's where your boundary is, and we're not going to go beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's during the talking stage and having this conversation about boundaries, you get to practice stating what your boundaries are, and you also get to see whether or not this person you're speaking to is able to respect those boundaries. Right?
Yeah.
In the way that are they going to try to invalidate them? Are they going to try to talk you out of them? Or are they just going to say, yeah, no, that makes sense, and that's what we're going to do, right? So number one is have the conversation about boundaries. Number two is to remember that you're not going to be able to talk your way into manufacturing loyalty from somebody who was not going to be loyal in the first place. And number three is to understand a better perspective. And the better perspective is that someone, especially as Muslims, right? Whether or not somebody is loyal definitely is a sign of whether or not they respect you. But because the penalty of infidelity, especially within marriage, is so high, right? There's so many ayat in the Quran, so many hadith that talk about how severe and egregious an act this is against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that somebody who commits infidelity within any kind of threshold, this is someone who doesn't respect God, right? So this is in addition to an issue being within your relationship, it's also an issue with their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you are out there and you're choosing a partner, it's a good idea to try to choose somebody who respects God, because if they respect their relationship with God, then then they will respect you. Out of fear from God, they're going to avoid the things that displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, like what people think of when they're cheating on their partner is they're doing it in secrecy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But a conscious Muslim understands that it's never a secret.
Exactly. There's no such thing, right?
Yeah.
So there's no such thing. So this is not in judgment to somebody who has cheated before in the past. Maybe they've repented. God knows. None of us are in any position to judge anyone else, right? But this is for the context of somebody who's out there and who's looking to choose a partner. If you're looking to choose a partner, one of the things that you should try to do is choose somebody who is God conscious, who has that taqwa within them, right? Has that God consciousness within them, whether you're religious or not. Because if somebody is God conscious, then out of respect for God, they'll respect you, right? It'll work out in your favor. So those are the three things, In Shaa Allah, during the talking stage.
Yes.
Okay, and then after the talking... let me add a fourth thing. There's
a surprise appearance. There's a fourth thing.
Yeah, because this is a very common question that I get from clients, and you see it all the time on platforms. There's this question of, I'm talking to somebody, right? I really like them, everything's working out fine, but they tell me that there was infidelity in the past. This is someone who has cheated on their partner in the past. They've repented, they've made amends. This was when they were younger, etc., etc., etc. Should I continue? Like, is this too much of a red flag? Should I continue with the situation? What do you think about that?
What, if somebody's cheated on someone in the past and they're still with that person?
No, like if somebody is talking to someone new, they've met someone new, and this new person is telling them, I've cheated on my partner in the past. But that's in the past. I'm a different person now. I've repented, etc.
If I was that person, I would move on.
You wouldn't talk to someone who has cheated in the past?
I wouldn't.
How come?
Right? Because everybody has their vices.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody has their addictions and everybody has their downfalls.
Yeah.
And it's always possible for them to relapse.
Yeah.
Because the shaitan, what it will do is it will try to pick at your weaknesses, right?
Yeah.
In your defense lines.
Yeah.
And if it succeeded in breaking through before,
yeah,
then it learned the formula.
Yeah.
And it's going to try to build upon that formula. And just like water beating at rock, right? Even if you repair the rock, that crack in the rock, that's still weaker than the original rock. And so the water can get back through.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful analogy, and that makes plenty of sense, right? So whenever a client comes to me and says, presents that exact scenario, I tell them 100% honest. I'm like, this is, at the end of the day, a decision that you have to make, right? But if it were me, and this was me, I would not. It would be too much of a red flag. Because at the end of the day, when you are meeting somebody, right, and you are in the talking stages, you're essentially going to be marrying a stranger, right? So regardless of how much due diligence you do, how much vetting you do, there's a certain amount of risk that already is present within marrying someone you don't know that well, right? So there is I always advise clients to not add any additional risk, right? Yeah. So if that additional, to the best of their ability, don't complicate the situation any more than they can. Again, there is no judgment on somebody who has cheated before in the past. Again, we have no right to judge them.
Yeah,
Yes, but you still have to make a decision that is best for you. And so many places in the field of psychology, right? So many different places, over and over and over, whenever they talk about risk factors, right? So whenever they, for any negative outcome or negative prognoses or whatever, and they talk about risk factors, a common risk factor is if this has happened in the past. So if this has happened to an individual in the past, then they're likely to reoffend, right? So the reality of the situation is, if a person has cheated in the past, they're probably more likely to cheat again in the future, more so than someone who hasn't cheated. Like, I haven't done that research. No one has done that research, but that's I guess, to the best of my knowledge, right? That might be out there somewhere, but it's too common sense. It's too common sense. So if you are in the early stages and you are not married to this person yet, or you're not even engaged to this person yet, I would, and it was my, everybody's my sister in Islam or my brother in Islam, but if it was my literal blood brother or blood sister, I would tell them it's too much of a risk. Right? Maybe their person is a better Muslim than you and I. Maybe this person, because of the tawbah that they've made, they're much closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And maybe this individual is the least likely to cheat more so than even you and I. That might be true for an individual, but you have to make decisions that are based on populations, right? So on the population level, people who have cheated in the past are probably more likely to cheat again, right? So for that reason, I always tell clients, it's your decision to make. But if you are looking for my advice, this is what I would tell my own sister.
You also shouldn't tell other people the sins that you've committed.
Yeah, that's also true too.
Yeah, it's been advised that you don't air out the sins that you've committed.
Yeah,
right?
SubhanAllah.
Yeah, we have the story of that lady that approached the Prophet, and she tried to tell him that she committed adultery.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he ignored her.
Yeah.
And then she said it again.
Yeah.
Ignore, until finally he said, okay. And then he put her to death.
Yeah.
Right? And he said that she was persistent in telling him about her sin.
Yeah.
Because she'd rather pay for it in this dunya.
Yeah, in this world. Yeah.
Than have to pay for it in the afterlife. Right? And so he said, yeah, she paid her dues.
Yeah, she was repentant, right? Yeah. So again, that's something. So like we said with point number 3, when it comes to infidelity, because this is a sin, right? This is a sin at the end of the day, and therefore it's a reflection on an individual's relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And if they repent, again, that's a reflection of their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's after you've done all of your due diligence, you've gone through the talking stage and you have married somebody and you are now married to them and you want to have this conversation around infidelity. In Shaa Allah, it doesn't happen to you, right? But the perspective that I hold, like it's in our marriage with you and I, is that this is something that's between you and God. Therefore, I don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, if God forbid this is something that happens, or on either of our end, this is something that is directly related to each's individual relationship with God Almighty.
Yeah.
And that means it's a bigger problem for you to deal with than it is for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely does.
Yeah.
And of course, the sins that are repeated.
Yeah.
The sins that are repeated without remorse.
Yeah. Allah
does bring them to light.
Yeah, eventually. So the reason why I say try to hold that perspective in your marriage, is that it really lifts the burden of what if, of the what if, of the anxiety that, especially if you've been cheated on in the past, that's a whole different conversation, a whole different podcast. Mm-hmm. It'll take we can go through that a different day of how to try to start to even process that. But even after you've done all the processing, you've done all the work, you're still going to be carrying that anxiety of what if. What are they doing? Yeah. And holding this perspective, I think, has been extremely helpful. It really, whenever something, the shaitan whispers this or whispers that, immediately you just let it go. That it's from that it's between this individual and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, mm-hmm. right? That's the way that I would approach that within marriage. I don't really want to talk about too much when it comes to infidelity and marriage here, because again, that's a huge topic by itself.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that a different day. Let's talk about social media.
They are apps.
Yes,
you can find them online by downloading things on your phone. And what's crazy is now they've even got access online, like on the websites and whatnot.
Yeah.
Using your computer, your PC, your Apple, whatever it is that you have.
Yeah.
As long as it has an internet connection, you can access social media. Now, Webster's Dictionary defines...
Okay, I think you're going to need me to step in. Okay. So I'm guessing... the fact that they're listening to this on some form of social media, they're aware of what social media is.
Probably, maybe not. Maybe somebody just downloaded it and said, "Hey, take a look at this."
Yeah, don't look at your phone at all. Just listen.
They don't have a phone.
Okay.
They don't have a phone.
It's not even a phone.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about social media. So when you're in the talking stage, right? There really isn't too much to be said. You can ask questions, I know a lot of us, we can look up the individual. So you can look up the individual on social media, right? So whenever I would meet somebody and they would be interesting, right? And we make it past the first week or 2 weeks or whatever it is of the talking stage, I would find them on social media, right? And what are some of the things that you can look for on the different platforms? I remember my friends will know, if any of them are listening to this podcast, that I used to have a rule when I was much younger that I would not talk to anybody who had more than 250 friends on Facebook. Right? So I'm dating myself a little bit because that's when Facebook was the primary platform.
Because it was Facebook.
Yeah. But 250, as soon as they had 251, I would just, that's not someone I was interested in.
It makes sense because we can realistically, at max, maintain 150 relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And so fast forward to 2024, things have changed a little bit, right? So social media is used for a number of things, including businesses. People are running businesses by themselves. So when you look somebody up on social media, you'll have a good idea of how their platform is being used. So I'm going to be a little bit hesitant to try to describe certain scenarios because, again, I don't want to pass judgment on anyone.
What did you see when you tried to search me up?
Well, first, yours was hard to find, but then when I found you, you have only exactly one platform. That clearly you haven't looked at in many years.
This was Facebook, was it not?
It was yours. It was on Facebook, and I only had 1 or 2 pictures, and I was like, okay, because that's what I was looking for. I was looking for an individual who doesn't really have a presence, or whose presence is in line with how they've been presenting themselves to me. If that makes sense. So if you meet somebody and they present themselves to you as very conservative, somebody who's very serious about their religion, maybe a little bit introverted, and you go on social media and you see the exact opposite, right? Where there's that inconsistency where they have, 2, 3, 4,000 followers. It's clearly not being used for business purposes, and they're just daily vlogging their life. Do you see what I'm saying? And it's, or you see some things on social media that are some of your deal breakers, right? Like maybe this person is just very comfortable with
having red hair, for example.
Okay. maybe they use some substances that you don't agree with I know a lot of people, smoking is a deal breaker for them, right? Like that's just their personal preference.
Me.
So yeah, definitely. And so you go on social media and you see that they're smoking, right? So that might be, do you see what I'm saying? So when you go on social media and you look up the person, the idea is to see whether or not the things they told you or the way they presented themselves, is it consistent with what you see there?
Yeah.
Like, are the two things in line? Another thing that personally that I would look out for is somebody who's very concerned about their appearance. Definitely, we all have our insecurities, right? There could be a number of reasons why somebody's concerned with their appearance, right? Where they're overly well groomed, right? Men or women, right?
Yeah, they're metropolitan.
Sure. Okay. I'm not familiar with that term, but I can guess what it means. But what I'm saying is there could be a number of reasons why the person is presenting themselves that way. But one of the ways is one of those reasons could be that people who are manipulative and who have personality disorders where they're overinflated sense of ego. I think you understand what it is I'm telling you. Those type of people, one of the ways to recognize them is they'll have a very strong social media presence where they are very concerned with their appearance, where they're overly groomed, right? I'm not saying that everyone who's like that on social media has this personality disorder, but many of the people who have this personality disorder have that type of presence on social media. Yeah. Hopefully you can understand the difference between the two, In Shaa Allah. So that's how you approach social media when you're in the talking stage. When you have, say you've done all of your due diligence, you've met somebody, their social media is consistent with what it is that they're presenting you with, and you're now married, and suddenly there's a switch up, right? Where you start to see that this person is now liking or following a number of people from the opposite gender. This is very common. Right?
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's very, very common. You have both. Usually it's women who are complaining about this, but sometimes you'll see it's also men. But most of the time it's women who are saying, my husband is following a lot of women on usually Instagram or Snapchat or what have you. And that can become an issue in their marriage.
That's just like one of the vices, is it not?
Yes, definitely. So how do you have this conversation? What would you advise her to do?
First of all, don't touch me.
Okay.
That's how she should start.
Okay. Just very aggressive right off the bat.
Just walks into the room.
Yeah.
Right. First of all, don't touch me.
So this is an inside joke because it's
I feel like it's an outside joke, to be honest.
No, this is a very niche joke. Like one of our favorite comedians, he said that if you ever want to escalate a conversation, you just start with saying, first of all, don't touch me. And immediately things escalate. Okay, so that's what that is. But how would you advise her? How would you advise the sister?
I mean, you just tell him straight up, like, hey, you've got all these women that you're following, right? And I don't know why you're following them, because these social media platforms, they're usually image based.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're just subscribing to see images of women that are not your wife.
Yeah.
So first of all, you've got the obvious, right? But secondly, it'll also hurt her ego.
Yeah.
And she's not really a fan of waffles, right?
So ego?
She's not a fan of waffles.
Okay.
So she's going to say, stop hurting my ego.
Yeah.
Lego my ego.
Lego my ego. Okay, so what you're saying is it's a conversation. It's a conversation. And I agree, but I would approach the conversation a different way.
Sure.
Because you don't really want to assume his intentions. Like, this is true for every conversation. We spoke about this a lot in the second podcast episode, the first year of marriage, where we went through in detail how to have sit down conversations and discussions, right? So for every sit down discussion, one of the first steps is not to assume why this person is or is not doing the thing. So in this case, social media, so you can't really assume why he's following all these women. So you're just going to sit down and go through the steps. The first step being where you validate his experience.
I appreciate that you like social media apps. And I understand that people do need to occupy themselves from time to time.
Yeah.
You know, it might be a sense of fun for you.
Yeah.
But
and then you go to the second step. In this case, I would also add that I understand that, you speak about autonomy, because this is going to be an issue of autonomy for him.
I get that you're your own person.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And I can't really force your decisions in this.
Yeah.
But I do want to understand.
So that then you go on to the second step. But when it comes to the issue of autonomy, I would also say something like, like you said, I understand and I respect the fact that you are your own person, and that so your social media is your social media. Okay. And that's perfectly fine, and I understand that. The second step is when you speak about your experience.
Yeah.
So in this case, you would say something like, I understand that. However, it's very painful for me when I see all of the women who are on this social media. It's important not to attack and say your or you too much, right? When I see on all the women on this Instagram account, it's very painful for me, because it makes me feel like I'm not good enough, especially because they don't really look like me, right?
And honestly, it is strange that we're losing like $150 to $250 a month on what, really?
Yeah.
What are you paying for?
All right, so that's a different conversation. So if we just tie up this bow, all right, because this is an actual issue in a lot of marriages, you say this is painful for me because these women don't really look like me, and it makes me feel like that I'm not good enough for you, right? Whether or not that's true, that's how I feel, right? And it really hurts. It really hurts.
Yeah.
So it's important to be vulnerable in this moment about, and try to articulate as much as you can how much it hurts. So step 3 is you now check in with him and you say, well, what do you think about all that? And
I didn't think you felt that way, honestly. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's not like for pleasure or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
As you know,
yeah.
I raise kittens.
Okay.
And I breed kittens.
Okay.
And these are just my clients. They're my clients, baby. You don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get you. All right. So that might be the response. And in step 3, more likely, it's usually going to be an issue where he voices his concerns around autonomy.
How dare you, first and foremost?
Yeah.
Be looking at my social media. This is my own private property.
Yeah.
I don't want you to judge me based off of the things that I do.
Yeah. So it's he might say something like that, right? But usually he'll say that's not, first they'll try to invalidate what you said in step 2. They'll be like, no, that's not what I think about you at all, right? I care about you very much. I'm very attracted to you. You are who I'm attracted to. These women mean nothing, right? That's usually what they go with. They say these women mean nothing. It's nothing. It's nothing. So they'll try to minimize the situation. And then in step 4, you tell them what your need is, right? So you express your need. You say, okay, I understand. To you, it might not be anything, right? To you might not be anything, but to me, it actually hurts a lot, and it's very big. And if you had expressed, if the roles had been reversed, right, I wouldn't want you to be hurt. So I'm asking you, and now you express your need, right?
Okay.
So I'm asking you, like, if you can make it so that I'm the only woman that you're looking at. And then you go on to step number 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Right? And in step number 4, you check in again to make sure that he understood what it was that your need is. And then that's how you go through the 4 steps, and you have this discussion. So this is going to be a discussion about needs and boundaries.
Yes.
And again, it will be very good practice for how to establish those boundaries. Now, what will happen after the fact is this person, your husband, may or may not follow through, right? So if he doesn't follow through and you see that the same thing is happening over and over again, you have the discussion maybe 1 or 2 more times.
Yeah.
And if at that point it's still there and it's still an issue, this is when you start considering therapy or counseling, or you speak to an imam. This is when you bring in a third party to have this conversation.
A mediator.
Yes, definitely. Because this is an issue where I've seen many marriages break up over this. And the damage that it does to women cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
Because the way that we look to our spouse is so intricately tied to our ego that it's almost one and the same.
Yeah.
And anything that challenges that, you're now starting to break down the person's ego, their sense of self-worth. And so that's why it's important not to ignore this. The other side of that coin, from the men's side, the most common complaint when it comes to social media is my wife she has too many pictures on social media, or I don't like the pictures, or I don't like the presence that she has on social media. It's attracting a lot of negative attention.
Unwanted attention, yeah.
Yes. And again, I fully understand, right? So you approach this in the exact same way that we spoke about with the other situation. This is going to be a conversation about needs and boundaries.
Yeah.
So you sit down. Step 1, you don't make any assumptions, right? and that's the first thing that you do. And then you sit down in your safe space and you have the conversation and you say, hey, and you validate her experience. Again, from her side, it's going to be an issue of autonomy.
Yeah.
So you're going to say, hey, I understand your social media account is your social media account and you have a right to do with it as you please, right? And I respect that. And then in step 2, you speak about from your experience how it's affecting you in as vulnerable a way as possible. So she understands your pain, right? Because this is your spouse. This is someone who cares about your well-being at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And then you go through the rest of the steps, right? They're going to be almost identical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we would hope that those conversations don't even need to happen.
Yeah.
Because even Islamically, we are meant to lower our gaze.
Yes.
And that does apply to online as well. And we're meant to be modest. And that does apply to online as well. So even if it does challenge their autonomy,
yes,
in some ways it should.
Yeah.
In some ways their autonomy should be restricted in that sense. Because the whole concept of religion is rules. It is autonomy being restricted for the better good. So there are going to be times where you can say, hey, first of all, I respect your autonomy, but there are times where your autonomy, it's leading you down a path that goes against Islam.
Yeah.
And I'm here to remind you to come back towards the good path, right? Reminder is
the right.
Right? Remind.
It's the Prophet ﷺ said that, yeah.
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Remind, right? Reminder is the way forward for Islam.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all about reminding people to pray, right? Reminding people to do good deeds, reminding people to lower their gaze, reminding people to not
be modest.
Yeah.
I agree. I 100% agree. It's like we said before many times. Before you are husband and wife, you are brother and sister in Islam, right? So even though this is affecting your spouse in the way that it's affecting them, if you even put that pain aside, they're still coming to you as a brother or sister in Islam who's looking out for your well-being and is telling you this is something that you need to come back. You know, you need to come back towards the within the boundaries of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us is and is not acceptable.
Yeah.
So I agree with that, but for the sake of when it comes to coaching, right? I have a wide spectrum of clients.
Yeah, you try to be as pragmatic as possible.
Yes, exactly. So that I had many clients, and most of my clients actually in the past were non-Muslim, and most of my clients now are Muslim. But even within Islam, you know, all of us have different relationships with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and are at different levels of iman, right? Different levels of practicing. So the advice that I give is within the fold of, like you said, being pragmatic, right? So that no one is excluded, regardless of where they are in their personal relationship with God. But those are the issues that tend to come up when it comes to social media and in marriage. And that's the way to approach having that conversation. It can be a difficult conversation, but it's an important one to have. And again, the same for the brother whose wife is, he's uncomfortable with his wife's social media presence online. If after you have the conversation, see how she responds. If there aren't any changes after 2 or 3 conversations, then you again seek outside help, and in order to bring in outside a more objective perspective. Because sometimes our spouses, they have a difficult, especially when you've been married for longer. They respect you, right? They respect you and your opinion, but they will hear the information better coming from an outside source. So in the same way with your siblings, right? You love your siblings, you respect their siblings, of course, but you take the information more seriously when it comes from like an outside family member, like an aunt.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's for that reason, outside help is something that should never be off the table. It really can help. And that's how you approach that. So the third thing, which is the cell phones, right? The reason why it gets its whole section is because it's such a big issue in so many marriages. And we're going to use it as an example of how to have conversations around trust. Trust is different from loyalty, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because trust is can be trust is actually the bedrock foundation of what marriage is at the end of the day. Go ahead.
Trust involves and deeply requires two people to be present.
Yeah.
Loyalty requires just the one.
That's true.
Because in order for someone to trust the other, that person has to be in front of them.
Yeah.
Right? But in order for someone to be loyal to another, that person is not usually in front of them. That person is usually far away from them.
Yes. I agree. Right? Trust is a function and depends on the other person's loyalty. Mm-hmm. But loyalty does not depend on the other person's trust.
True.
Yeah. So it's one is an independent variable, one is a dependent variable.
You can be loyal and still not trust the person as long as they're paying you to be loyal. You can be loyal.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Okay, so In Shaa Allah, like it's a little bit of an abstract concept and hard to differentiate. Hopefully that helps you see a little bit of how the quality, each one is different from the other, right? So for that reason, we're going to talk a little bit about trust.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to conceptualize it is cell phones. Within the talking stage, it's not really applicable, right? Because you're not really together long enough to be using each other's phones for Muslim context. But after you're married, this becomes an issue, especially when one of the partners has been cheated on in the past, right? And they are still carrying this anxiety of what if. Mm-hmm. They will compulsively check their partner's phone. It happens.
Even if somebody's cheated on someone in the past, they'll still check their phones.
Agreed. It's actually one of the common signs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because usually what people do to self-comfort is they make the assumption that other people, of course, would do what they've done. And so they assume that the other person's also likely to cheat.
Yeah, they project.
Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to cell phones, let's first have a conversation of how you and I approach this topic.
Yeah.
So when we got married, was me looking through your phone an issue?
No. I actually had my phone unlocked.
Yeah.
The only reason why I now have a lock screen is because you told me that if I ever lose my phone, it's to keep my stuff safe.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
So when I'm in my house, and I'm not going anywhere, I would prefer my phone to be unlocked.
Yeah.
And just easily swipe. Anyone can swipe to get in.
Yeah.
But I lost my phone one time.
Yeah, you did.
In the Uber.
One time?
Yeah, one time. Well, in the Uber, in someone else's hands.
That's true.
And the only reason I got my phone back was because the next ride was kind enough to say, oh, somebody lost their phone. They could have kept it, right? And since that day, I have a lock screen on my phone because it's to protect against whatever could happen outside.
That's true. Okay. So what I'm hearing is that you're not really worried about handing your phone over to me. Even if you sit down, open it up, and start looking through it.
No.
It wouldn't bother you?
There's nothing to hide.
That's true. Vice versa and likewise, right? Like I always have a lock screen on my phone. Everybody knows what that password is.
Yeah.
But I always have a lock screen on my phone for exactly what you stated, so that none of the information gets out.
Yeah.
So in our marriage specifically, this was a conversation we actually had about in the beginning, when we were first married, where I asked, How comfortable are you with me using your phone?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because sometimes yours is closer and I need to look something up, or vice versa. Or, you know, you'll have more data than I do when we go out. Like, there's so many reasons where you just use each other's phones.
Yeah.
So we had that conversation, and you said you're fully comfortable with it. I said I'm fully comfortable with it, and that's just how we live our lives.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
My password is the same as yours.
Is it? Yeah, you're right. It is.
Yeah.
Just in case I forget.
Yeah.
But for other people, especially when an individual comes in with having been cheated on in the past, this can be an issue. Or another time this can be an issue is when somebody has a very strong sense of difficulty with emotional intimacy. So sometimes when people have avoidant insecurity, attachment insecurity, where closeness feels uncomfortable to them, this extends to their phone, right?
Yeah.
So the person like this might not have anything to hide, but having that fluid boundary in terms of their phone is very uncomfortable to them. So this is a time when somebody might feel uncomfortable with you checking their phone, or somebody might just have a past where maybe they're a cheater. So they had cheated on somebody in the past.
Yeah.
So they hold that, again, a similar anxiety, ironically, where this is something that can happen. Let me keep an eye on the other person's phone. So these are a couple of reasons.
It could also be that they're secretly rich and trying to hide it from you.
Is that what's been happening?
God, no.
You know, but that's definitely an issue. But there are so many other issues. Sometimes people, they grew up in circumstances where they didn't really have a chance to have boundaries in their household with their parents or with their siblings, and they always felt like impeded. Their personal space was being impeded upon. So similar to the person who has avoidant insecurity, attachment insecurity, this is someone who holds privacy very high in regard.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's many different reasons. The whole point of stating that is that if your partner, you marry somebody and your partner is hesitant to let you see their phone, don't assume it's because they're cheating. Yeah. There could be, like we said, rule number 1 of any conversation: don't make assumptions. Right? But when you do get married and you have this conversation, just like you had the conversation before about infidelity, understand that their boundary is their boundary. Don't invalidate their boundary. Don't make assumptions about why there might be their boundary. You can be a little bit curious and ask questions, right? You'd be like, I'm just curious, like, can you tell me a little bit about why? And to try to, in an effort to understand more than gather evidence, right? But again, you're just having another boundary conversation to see where their lines are, right? And to see where your lines are, and that way you'll be able to better respect each other's lines. Now, if you are married to somebody and it turns out they're a little bit avoidant, and because they're avoidant, they don't really want you to check their phone. Honestly, if they're a little bit avoidant...
Honestly, you would get the vibe that they're avoidant before you get married to them.
Yeah, but sometimes I have many clients who are a little bit naive. And so they're not really able to recognize the signs that there's going to be an incompatibility here based on attachment style, right? Until they're already married. And then they discover that their new husband or their new wife is very uncomfortable with emotional intimacy, not just in this phones, but in so many different areas.
These are the type of questions you guys should be asking. Yes,
exactly. Like the previous podcast episodes. But let's just say that this is the issue. If you're going to have to, this is where trust comes in, right? So you're going to, unless you have hard evidence, right? Unless you have hard evidence that this person is cheating. And when I say hard evidence, Islam says you need 4 witnesses, right? You need to bring 4 witnesses before it can be said that somebody is cheating. So unless you have not just intuition but hard evidence, it's important that you practice trust. Trust is not naivety. Trust is not being stupid. This is somebody that you married them for a reason. Protect yourself, right? Don't leave yourself unnecessarily vulnerable, like financially and in terms of emotional support with your family. Don't move for somebody unless you 100% trust them, like all of these things. But protect yourself where you can, but you need to extend a little bit of trust. The way that you do that is by remembering what we said at the top of the podcast, that the person that whether or not they are being cheating or there's an infidelity has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if somebody is doing something, remove yourself from that mentally. Just practice the affirmation. If he is doing something or if she is doing something, that's between them and God. I'm going to focus on my relationship with them, right? I'm going to focus on my relationship with this individual. And if I see actual evidence that they are cheating on me, or I start to really suspect that something is going on, okay, I'll address it then. But until then, this is a me issue. This is me having to manage and process my anxiety. And the way I'm going to process my anxiety is to remember, if there is infidelity, it's between them and God and has nothing to do with me.
It is difficult to get 4 witnesses to witness the act at the same time. That requires a level of brazen public display.
The reason it's because the damage of an accusation is also severe. So if you are now, like, let's just say that you're married to somebody and they really don't want to let you see your phone, and honestly you have your intuition is telling you something is going on, and you go and approach them and say, I think you're cheating on me, right? Or are you cheating on me? Even just are you cheating on me? Can do real damage. Because what that's doing is now you're damaging their trust in you. Right? Because now they're thinking, this person doesn't trust me, and automatically they will trust you less. And like we always say, the bedrock foundation of marriage is trust. That's it's not love, it's trust. So you really don't want to risk that. Like the accusation, the damage of an accusation, a false accusation, is very severe, and you don't want to make that willy-nilly. Right? So if you are having real suspicions, there is a way to have this conversation where you sit down with your spouse and just say, like everything else, you begin with validating their experience. Just say, I know you think that I've been weird in the last couple of months or the last couple of weeks. I understand that, I'm really going through something. And then you talk about what your issues are. Like, I'm feeling a little bit insecure. Like I'm feeling like something is off. I'm feeling like these days, maybe you're coming home a little bit late, or I'm feeling that you used to let me see what's going on in your phone, but these days it's a little bit more secretive. Or you're more hesitant. Like, whatever is the suspicion, right? You voice those things, and you also say, it's making me feel like something is going on. It may not be going on, but it's making me feel like something is going on, and I hate that feeling, because I know I really want to be able to trust you 100%. And then you go through step number 3, where you ask them, so what do you think about that? You do the check-in, and they'll say, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've been more secret. Like, I'm not showing you my phone anymore because there's some confidential information on there from work or whatever reason that they give, right? Or if like try to understand their reasons. The only time that red flag would go up in my mind is if they straight up lie to you, right? If
they get like really angry for no reason.
Yeah, or they gaslight you, or they say, "What are you talking about? I'm not secretive with my phone." Or they say, "What are you talking about? I've been coming home the same time, or all of this time," right? If it does come to that, I would try to confirm it.
Yeah, that's wild.
It happens, right? It happens. Like when people are caught off guard like that,
yeah,
their first instinct is to deny, right? So if he had said to me that, okay, I'm not secretive with my phone, just be like, oh, okay, all right, then it might just be in my mind. Is it okay if I see it now? Call his bluff, right?
Checkmate.
Yeah, you call it, like you have. If somebody is gaslighting you, try to show them, like with proof that no, what you're saying doesn't reflect reality, right?
It's not matching up.
Exactly. So in this case, that you might say that, or if somebody says, "What are you talking about? I've been coming home every night the same time." You just say, "Oh no, you normally you come home at 3, but these days you've been coming home at 8 o'clock." He's like, no, I always come home at 3. Then you'd be like, oh, okay. Then you just bring up the Ring camera.
I knew you were gonna go there.
Yeah, you just Ring camera to be like, oh, it's been here.
Well, you may not have noticed because the delivery man arrived at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
To install this Ring camera.
Yes, because
and you arrived at 7:30.
Okay, and they might. It's the goal of providing evidence is not to be petty. That's never the goal. It's to let them understand that what they're saying doesn't reflect your reality or objective reality in this case, right? Just say this is why. Like it's more trying to help them understand and saying this has been my experience, and here's some information really validating that what I'm saying to you is true. That this is my experience. And if they go into denial mode or gaslighting mode, or they're becoming very angry, then this really gives you a lot of the information that you need that something might be going on. Yeah. And if you think that something
at that point, I would back off.
Yeah, there really isn't much reason to continue the rest of the conversation, right? Because you can tell them something like in this case, your need would be what? To please start showing me your phone or something. You're just band-aids, right? So if you are in a position where you're having this conversation and it's really starting to look like that your suspicions may be true, then just be like, okay, I appreciate all the things that you're saying, right? But I wish I could say that they were making me feel better, but they're really not. And I think we're at a point that we now need counseling. Right? Now need counseling or therapy.
What I would have thought you would have said was like that first conversation.
Yeah.
Lets him know or lets her know that something is up, and you sort of get the feeling that something is up.
Yeah.
And if they're denying it, right? What I would have thought to do was back off, right? And say, okay, well, I just wanted to let you know that I've been getting some weird messages, weird feelings about our situation. And hopefully I stop getting those feelings in the future. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And then you just wait to see if their behavior changes, right? If they're like, oh, if they actually were, right? If they're like, I flew close to the sun here. Yeah. Let me just stop. She's right. He's right. Let me just stop. Yeah. I gotta buckle down and focus on my relationship. Yeah. I got a little too into the clouds.
Yeah. That's definitely one option. And you can take that road, right? But if you're at a point where because a few things are happening here. First of all, your sense of trust in your spouse is shaky now. Yeah. And that is going to be difficult to repair without a lot of reassurance on their part that what you were thinking is not what's happening, right? And that's hard to achieve, especially by yourselves. That's usually the point where I start to suggest counseling, because with counseling a number of things can happen. Yeah. Number one, they might feel safe to tell you the truth of either way, right? And they might be able to tell you the truth in a way that you'd be able to accept it.
Yeah.
With the professional third party present. And number two, like if it turns out that this was just a false accusation, it was a lot of anxiety on your part, or a lot of coincidences that added up to suspicion that was really that your partner wasn't cheating on you, then having a professional there will give you the tools that you need to start to rebuild trust in a real way. Yeah, in a real way. Go ahead.
For me as a guy, if I were accused, right?
Yeah.
And if I were actually not doing it, right? And you were to on the first conversation push for counseling, I think it would hurt me.
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
Like if I actually were not.
Yeah.
And on the first conversation you said, okay, well, I get the feeling that you are, and let's go to counseling. For me, it would be like, what just happened?
Yeah.
My word didn't cover any distance there, and now we're going to counseling.
Yeah.
And now there's a third person that now has this prejudgment of me that I have cheated on my spouse.
Yeah.
Right? Because usually for men, the assumption is, they did it. In all regards. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. That's
especially
true.
With a third party. Right?
Yeah.
What, like in marriage counseling, what do they do? Like, or even in public where two people are getting divorced, a man and a woman.
Yeah.
People usually say, what did he do? Right?
Yeah.
They usually say, what did he do?
Yeah.
So I would hope that we don't jump to counseling off the first instance, the first conversation, right? Even if the trust is broken, in my case, it would be broken more so if you went to counseling immediately.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying that because in your case, or in somebody who hasn't done anything, they wouldn't go to gaslighting.
Yeah, so you're saying that there's a certainty there.
Yeah.
Like, you don't bring up the subject unless you're very certain.
No, I'm saying that you bring up the subject when you have enough anxiety there that it's now affecting your relationship, right? Anything that's affecting your relationship, you now have to have a conversation about.
Yeah.
So, but in having this conversation with your spouse, they are now gaslighting you.
They're actively gaslighting
Yeah, they're
you.
actively gaslighting you. Like they'll tell you things that you can prove.
Okay, that changes the
exactly.
Yeah,
that's
that
what I'm
changes
saying.
The dynamic.
Yeah,
if I'm lying to you, if I'm gaslighting you, then I guess
I'm saying like
counseling is a thing.
Exactly, because if it will be too hard to continue on as normal, knowing that they just lied to me in this instance.
Blatantly.
Yeah, exactly. Or they had just gone off the wall angry.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's a big red flag when somebody just says, "I can't believe," like they have.
How dare you?
Yeah, exactly.
Here I am eating my waffles.
Okay.
And you come to me attacking my ego.
Okay.
Like Lego my ego, let me eat my ego.
All right, can I live?
Yeah.
But it's so that's what I'm saying. So if you in that conversation you are now really leaning towards something is going on, like it didn't do anything to reassure you. Whereas if you have a conversation with your spouse and they're like, oh, like if you're talking to your spouse about this subject and they genuinely didn't do anything, their primary concern is, what did they do to make you think that? Yeah. They're going to be like, I'm so sorry. What is it that I did? I've been coming home late. You know what? I've been coming home because we've been having this project, right? I didn't want to bother you with it because of A, B, C, D, E, but we're working on this project. Like, here it is. And their concern is calming you down. Yeah. Right? Just like you can think about in from your perspective, if you had been excused, your concern is calming down your partner. You're now trying to bring up evidence, say, oh, no. You can see here on my phone, this is the text message chain. This is the group chat with the project. They're going to want to calm you down. Okay. Right? So
that for me, that was the missing link, is that there's a very viable certainty that the person was lying to you or like trying to gaslight you or being shady. Exactly. They weren't being forthcoming.
The second thing is when you do actually go to counseling, therapists and counselors are well trained.
Mm-hmm.
They're not I understand there's a societal bias, right? But that bias with most good counselors and therapists doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right? They're when you're coming in, the situation, the case is Mrs. A believes that is worried that Mr. A is cheating. Right? And so the concern is going to be like, well, why do you think he's cheating? And if she says things that really don't add up, right, then the focus of that conversation is going to be reassurance.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why, like, what's going on within you that you're suspecting this man?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be an issue. It's going to be her problem that needs to be processed and understood. Whereas if it looks like there really is an issue, like if she's giving this is why I think it's happening, because A happened, B happened, C happened, D happened. You know, I spoke to this woman. She said that they did have like she has hard evidence.
Yeah.
Then the focus of the conversation is going to be seeing how are we going to move forward with this.
Yeah.
Right. Like what's going to be the answer for this couple, and that answer is going to be different based couple to couple. Do they have children? Like what was the extent of it? Like there's so many factors that we can't.
Yeah.
There's no way we can give a baseline response. So we said we weren't really going to talk about infidelity in marriage, but we did.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of an approach. We were talking about that in the context of what you're seeing your spouse's phone, right?
Yeah.
So in summary, that's going to be another conversation about boundaries, just like you had that conversation around what do you consider cheating, or you have that conversation around social media. This will be another conversation around boundaries. And just like with all of those conversations, you don't make assumptions, and whatever boundaries that your spouse has, you respect them.
Yeah.
You validate them and you respect them. Even if you don't agree with them, everyone has a right to their own boundaries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There are also times that you just got to make sure you choose the correct counselor or therapist, right?
Yeah.
One prime example of choosing the wrong counselor or the wrong therapist is when you explain your problem, right? You're like, oh, Mr. Counselor, I'm afraid my wife, she does this and this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
The counselor, instead of trying to help you, is like, I'm sorry, who are you and how are you in my house?
All right, that's a different situation.
Yeah.
That's a whole different situation, but you do really bring up a good point.
Yeah. Well, if your counselor says that to you, you have to get out of the house immediately.
You should leave.
You should leave. Something went wrong.
A lot of things went wrong. But that is, again, it brings up a really good point. If you are at that point in your marriage where you need therapy, you need counseling, it can really help, right? It's important to find the right counselor. If you're looking for somebody who is Muslim, simply because they understand the context of your marriage within a Muslim context, that makes sense, right? There are so many across the globe now.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. So just take some time, just like you would looking for a good house. You're going to be patient, find a counselor that works for the both of you.
Yeah.
And understand that therapy and counseling helps. The goal of counseling is to reach a point of peace. Whether or not that point of peace is going to be through continuing your marriage or not, there will be benefit regardless, right? Yeah. So just to reach a point of peace between you and your spouse. So just don't shy away. It doesn't mean that things are impossible to fix now. It just means that the situation has reached a point above your pay grade, and you need help, and that's fine.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
I like this. This was nice.
It was a good conversation.
Do
you think there's anything else that we missed? Anything you want to add?
We were very extensive.
Okay.
Yeah.
If anyone's still listening. But hopefully we were able to cover a little bit. We'll probably come back to this topic later on because it's such a large topic within the community. But hopefully we were able to cover a little bit of how to have these conversations during the talking stage and during marriage with your spouse. You'll notice that the approach is different. With the talking stage, you're deciding whether or not to continue with this person. And with marriage, it's about practicing how to have those sit-down conversations and deciding whether or not you now need counseling.
Yes.
Those are the two general approaches. So it should be everything. I want to say Jazaa K'Allah Khayr. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you benefited. If you have any comments, we would love to hear about them. If you have any questions that you would like us to go through here in the podcast, you can find our email down below in the description. It's support@ZahraHassanCoaching.com. If you feel free to reach out, and we will do our best to help you, In Shaa Allah. And finally, we have a program, inshallah, that I'm designing for Muslim women, which is a 1-hour intensive workshop going through a beginner's guide to how men think. Inshallah, hopefully it'll help women to understand the different intentions of men when they're searching for a spouse, to expedite that process. If you're interested in joining the waitlist for that program, it'll be in the end of July. You'll find the description down below. And
if you liked the episode, please do give it a like and let us know what you think, and subscribe. See if you can also tell us in the comments below, what would you like us to talk on?
Yeah, definitely, inshallah. Like we have a list, definitely a list of topics to get through to build sort of a database of information to address common issues within the community.
Sort of like a one-stop shop.
Inshallah. But yeah, if you had anything that you would specifically like to go through, reach out to us in the email or comment down below. Oh, and you can always follow us on Instagram @ZahraHassanCoaching.
Bio in the description below.
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you everyone for listening to us today. I know today it was a long episode.
Jazaa K'Allah Khayr. Hopefully you benefited. And we'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.